welcome to the special show on ET Now. We are calling it Metal, the Future of the Packaging Industry. Now, how many of you really think about packaging, especially when you're opening that packet of chips or just picking up that cold can of drink in your hand? Because actually that plays a crucial role in your entire experience, and it also plays a crucial role in terms of really what happens to the environment every time you throw that packet of chips away or throw that can away. And we are here to discuss in greater detail about really all aspects of the packaging industry and make a connect to you as the consumer. So let me introduce you to some of the key players who are here in the industry, and starting off with Mr. Sanjay Bhatia, who's the Managing Director of Hindustan Tin Works. Thanks, Sanjay, for joining us. Next to him is Mr. Bhavik Bakshi, the Vice Chancellor of Terry University. And finally, we've got Mr. Samar Singh Shekhawat, the Senior Vice President of United Breweries. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Right, when I was first given this topic, packaging, it sort of made me think that, we don't really think too much about packaging. It's there for me, I get the product, and pretty much most consumers just toss it away and don't think about it again until they have to go out and buy another product. But for you, as part of the industry, clearly packaging is actually a huge role, has actually grown at a tremendous pace here in the country, given the kind of economic progress that we've made. So take us through really what the kind of scope is of this industry in the current context of the Indian economy.
Starting with the word you said, packaging. It packs the aging process of the product which is packed therein. That's the primary role of any packaging. And packaging industry in India, or anywhere for that matter, generally grows double than the GDP. If India grows at 7 to 8%, packaging industry grows at 15 to 16%, and that's a fact in India also. Today's size of the packaging industry in India is about $17 billion, and it is expected to be double than this size in 2015. So that's the kind of size which the packaging industry has. It goes through all the different packaging formats, whether it is glass, whether it is tin, whether it is paper. So everything, it comprises of all the segments of the industry.
Right.
And the packaging, as we call it, it is an expression of the soul of the product. It's a silent salesman. The first thing which consumer connects is the packaging to buy any product. So that's the importance of packaging. In
fact, I think that's a great point to bring in, Samar, at this point, because clearly, that's the connect that you want to make, for instance, at United Breweries, when your consumer wants to go out and connect. So how crucial a role is really packaging in terms of, how you decide that the kind of packaging that each product should actually go with?
Well, I think it's very critical, as Sanjay said. In fact, he put it really poetically. But packaging is perhaps the most critical element in the consumer decision-making process, especially at point of purchase. The moment of truth is when the consumer picks up that pack. And what I have seen is consumers are getting more and more aware and more savvy. So if you look at a supermarket or at traditional trade, no matter where you go, you'll see consumers picking up the pack, reading the nutritional contents, reading information, looking at best before dates, looking at manufacturer details, etc. And that's what triggers a purchase decision, and especially so for a category like alcoholic beverages, because we operate in a media dark environment.
Right.
The packaging determinant is the single most critical point in the decision-making process. So I couldn't overstate that point more.
So here we have an industry that is growing in leaps and bounds, but clearly this is bound to have an environmental impact, especially with India being one of the fastest economies in the world. And let me bring you in at this point, because you're looking at the environmental impact. Is it all bad news when you hear the kind of numbers that both the guests on both your sides are talking about?
It cannot be totally one-sided. It is not totally one-sided, and clearly packaging plays a huge role in terms of making sure that the products don't get spoiled too early, and in making sure they make it from the manufacturer or the producer to the consumer, and then making sure that there is a shelf life. So these are very, very important things. I mean, clearly wasting food is much worse than wasting packaging material, so to say.
So that's one big important
that's a huge
plus.
positive, no question about it. And consumers also connect with it, and it leads to greater maybe satisfaction of some sort. So those are all positives which cannot be overlooked. But clearly there is also a negative side. Like most things, there are positives and negatives, and the negative side with respect to packaging comes from the fact, and it's not just packaging, a lot of things that we use in today's modern world comes from the fact that there is a lot of dependence on non-renewable resources. Be it fossil fuels, be it minerals, be it even water if it is pumped out from the ground too fast. So these are the challenges that we face today, and the ultimate challenge is to figure out where is a healthy balance between all of these things.
So
you
let's
can't
talk a
go
little bit
totally
about
one way or the other.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about that balance. And Sanjay, I'm going to ask you here about, we are here to talk a little bit more about metal. Now, there are various forms of packaging, as you just said. When I hear about metal packaging, obviously I think about the cans which are there all around us. But as an industry producer, really, how do you approach metal? Because it's still a very small part of the entire packaging industry, just about 10%?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, but metal packaging, again, if you really see, it's in existence for the last 200 years.
Right.
It's a traditional pack, but very important packaging material.
Is that right? For the last 200 years?
200
because I thought
years,
the technology is very...
We just completed 200 years of food can last year, and that's where we started our Can Environment Week.
Right.
So you see, it has completed. It's a traditional pack, but now if you really see, since 70s and 80s, it has really seen a lot of technological improvements, bringing a lot of consumer conveniences, a lot of formats in printing, a lot of formats in designs and all. So those are the things which improvements have come so that it can really communicate.
So now we can see metal packaging. Explain to me, make that connect to me as a consumer. I know it's there in my food cans.
Yes.
It's there in my beverage cans.
Yeah.
And what else is it there in terms of packaging?
No, it's in the non-food segment also. It's in paints, pesticides, and aerosol sprays and all those things. So it's everywhere.
Right.
So it's not only food and beverage, but they are the most important segment for metal, food and beverage. So because if I really see, almost in metal packaging, almost close to 50% of the consumption, or rather 75%, sorry, 75% of the consumption of the metal packaging goes into food and beverage.
Okay, let's take that forward in terms of beverage, because here we're talking about the future of packaging and metal, and we all know about the cans, but as a company you have various materials there in front of you that you can utilize. But what about you as a company? How do you really approach metal and in terms of really its future for your own products?
Well, I think the cans, whether they are steel or aluminum, are regarded as a premium packaging delivery format. So that's number one. Number two, it is regarded as being tamper-proof, being hermetically sealed. There is a reassurance on the part of the consumer that this is a genuine product. Number three, as far as printing technology is concerned, as far as creative rendition of our brand name, design, logos, etc., it is second to none. There's a huge flexibility of the kind of graphics and designing that you can put on cans, and that increases the allure and attractiveness of the can. Fourth, the stackability of cans, whether it's on the retail shelves or inside chilling equipment, is optimal. Space utilization is much higher than other packaging delivery formats.
Right.
Very importantly, it's a portable, mobility-enabled packaging delivery
Basically,
format.
I can take it in my hand and take it anywhere.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's you can carry it and consume the product on the go, and that's huge convenience as far as the consumer is concerned.
Bhavik, let me bring you in here because in terms of here we have two speakers who are talking about really metal and their importance, and both from a end user perspective and from a producer's perspective. From an environmental perspective, and especially here in India, do you think the fact that the industry appears to be moving in a certain direction, is that going to benefit in terms of really how we approach recycling here in the country?
Well, there is this mantra of reduce, reuse, recycle.
Yeah.
Right? So reduce means not use at all. That's the best thing. Reuse means you reuse, the same thing, you can reuse it without really doing much with it. And then there is a third one, which is recycle. Now, recycling is of many types. There is recycling where the material can be used for the same task. Then there is downcycling, where the material can be used for a kind of a lower task. So, for example, tires being used for chappals. That's not recycling, that's downcycling. The neat thing about cans, and one of the things that is attractive from an environmental point of view, is that even though the total amount of energy that it takes, for the entire life cycle of a metal can be quite high on a per can basis, the good thing is that they can be recycled lots of times, and it may come, it has to be picked up, and talking of India specifically, because of the important role that the rag pickers play in our recycling infrastructure, if I may call it that, cans have more of a value as compared to many other materials out there. So they tend to get picked up much more readily than a lot of other materials. And you can see for yourself standing on a train station or just look by the side of the roads, it's very rare to find metal cans sitting there.
All we see are mounds of plastic and
That's right.
possibly paper. So that's the one thumbs up. Yeah,
Just one thing I would like to add what you said is that the recyclability, as you said, is, I totally agree, it's very important. You see, if you really see, we looked at the figures. If 1 ton of steel, which is recycled, this saves about 1.5 tons of iron ore, and also half a ton of coking coal. Like what I'm trying to say is that if you use a can which is recycled, so you will still produce a steel. I mean, you will save so much of the minerals, natural resources in the process.
No, one is theoretically when a product is recyclable. The other is actually implementing that theory in actual practice, especially in a country as large as India. And you've mentioned the point of rag pickers. And clearly they play a fundamental role in each of your business life cycles. Please explain to us, because I understand you've been sort of the initiator in terms of this Can Environment Week. And, you know, it is a pity because you mentioned rag pickers. They're such a fundamental part of the system, yet they're perhaps the worst paid and the worst looked after. So how do you as a company really approach this? Because it's clearly a fundamental part of the way your business operates.
You see, the Can Environment Week idea came to us last year when, as I mentioned, that the can completed 200 years of its existence. So we focused at 2 issues. One is that to talk to my customer's customer and tell them that how we are going to position a metal can in terms of that the package which they are buying or the product which they are buying in a metal can is totally recyclable and environment friendly. That's one thing which is very, very critical in this. Second is then the other leg of this Can Environment Week was to look at the rag pickers who we feel are very important in the whole recycling wheel. I mean, they are the cog in the wheel, as we call it. So we then went through an NGO, Chintan and Exnora. These are the 2 NGOs we decided because they were working with the rag pickers. So we went to them, and along with them taking their help, we went to the rag pickers and saw their conditions, and then we organized health camps, we provided health insurance, we did painting competition with their children.
That's really wonderful because,
so a lot of things we did to motivate them, to encourage them, and also then we gave them a vocational training to their children so that they can learn something else also rather than just depending on, just live a life of a rag picker.
Yeah, that's really wonderful because every time I see the neighborhood Kudawala or Kabadiwala, you just think, you know, who's looking out for him. But having said that, running a business is about cold hard numbers. You want to take a look at, you know, what really works for you in terms of dynamics and really the reusability and the cost factor. How does metal place itself there, especially in terms of tin cans?
Well, cans are by and large more expensive than other packaging delivery formats, especially true of the alcohol beverage industry. But because of the reasons that I told you in terms of the premium look and feel, the mobility, the portability, the flexibility of packaging design graphics, shelf life, genuine product perceptions amongst consumers, there is a natural gravitation of consumers towards cans. In fact, we have certain products in our portfolio that are doing extremely well after they've been launched in the can format. And in many cases, the cans are the leading packaging delivery formats for those product SKUs.
So though they are more expensive, you're saying you actually get better margins?
Well, they're more expensive for us. And the attempt is actually to price them to give desired value to the consumer so that for us, it is a question of getting more by investing more. So more from the consumer by way of satisfaction, genuine product experience, by investing in an upgraded premium packaging delivery format.
Right.
In fact, today cans contribute to about 10% of our volumes, and over the next 3 years, we're looking at pushing this to about 25%, close to a quarter of our volumes. 3 years from now, aspirationally would come out of cans across our entire product portfolio.
But do you see the recycling sort of side of the story becoming more efficient, and in that sense perhaps costs becoming lower? This is just especially for me as an end consumer over the time frame you mentioned.
Well, over a period of time, relative to other packaging formats, the costs will hopefully start coming down. I mean, 10 years ago, when you looked at cans, let's say in the soft drink industry versus bottles then, the packaging differential was significantly larger than it is today. As volumes go up, that is another, you will drive economies of scale. Right. And as, you know, technology, and in terms of the reusability, recyclability that we're discussing, gets more effective and on a bigger scale, I'm sure end consumer benefits to the consumer would be more than possible to pass on.
How you read the Indian consumer vis-a-vis, you know, say, consumers that you're catering to across the world, and, you know, in terms of how ready is the Indian consumer to really try on these various newer forms of packaging that you're talking about, how receptive he or she is, because is price a big one in their mind? And secondly, in terms of global practices, as companies, do you think India is at par in terms of the practices that it's following, you know, across the whole life cycle of the packaging industry, right from the start, when you're delivering the product to actually recycling it?
I'll answer the first question first. In terms of Indian consumers, I think are increasingly getting more savvy. Yes, price is a key determinant. However, larger than price, it's the value equation that the consumer derives. So the same lady who will not pay more than 2 rupees extra for a kilo of sugar has no hesitation in going buying a lipstick that costs 1,000 rupees. Right. So it's the value that one ascribes to what one is getting. So the cost per se is just one determinant. You know, they're handcrafted Bali's leather shoes selling in South Extension at 20,000 rupees a pair, and that particular shop sells out 1 pair a day. So obviously there are people who believe that that is worth that value. So it's really value that drives the Indian consumer, which is really the price equation at which I believe that this price or this product is worth that price. So it's more that is driving it. Right. As far as Indian companies being on par with global companies are concerned, I would say that we've made a good beginning. We obviously have some distance to travel, but it's much better now than it was earlier on. Partly it is discipline brought on by the corporate sector themselves, partly, as Bhavik was saying, in terms of policy legislation that is coming, and more importantly in terms of the legacy that we want to leave for our future generations. It is inevitable. At our organization we do a lot around our breweries in terms of other initiatives, but specific to this, we are completely with Sanjay and his point on the rag pickers, because that is the primary mode of collection for some of our other packaging delivery formats as well. So yes, I mean, India has made a big start, but obviously there is some way to go.
Right.
May I add one thing? You know, there is a lot of need for policies over here. You know, I mentioned the rag pickers and so on, they would play a role, but that alone I don't think is going to be enough. Right. And particularly, you know, it's not just the metal, but the other materials, packaging materials too, that has to be dealt with. You know, what is one of the approaches or one of the ways that needs to be taken into account and utilized is to look at different alternatives, right? I mean, packaging, as I mentioned earlier, they have a positive side, but there is a negative side too. There needs to be a proper scientifically based systematic view that needs to be taken to this. You know, do what is basically an environmental life cycle analysis.
We've touched on various points, but you know, we're talking about the future of the packaging industry. What, according to you, Sanjay, is going to be the game changer as far as this industry is concerned, or that you are waiting for? Where when you talk about that 5 years from now picture, we're going to be looking at a completely different scenario.
You see, in metal packaging, what we look at is, let's say, when the modern retail comes, I think a lot of opening, a lot of boost will be given to the metal packaging industry. Similarly, when the food processing, when it goes up to 20%, it's a game changer. Like Samar mentioned that in beverage, in beer, if they are looking at from 10% and taking it to 25%. So these are the game changers. When my customers start investing in the filling lines, can filling lines, my food processor starts investing in those processing, and government enables that to help them to grow. I mean, in terms of, they are already doing in terms of food park and other things which is being done. So these are the game changers for metal packaging industry. And also finally, the availability of the raw materials locally. I mean, if let's say I have to make an aluminum can, today we have to import aluminum. Even for the beverage, steel beverage can, we have to import steel because it's not available in country. Right. And there are producers who are looking at it. You see, Samar talked about the cost coming down. one of the reasons of cost coming down, apart from because they earlier used to import. Ours is the first company to invest in the beverage can making line in India and supply cans to them. So that brings down the cost, and also it's just-in-time delivery. I think a lot of logistics and a lot of supply chain benefits come to my consumer, and these are the game changers according to me. And also finally, promoting metal can as the environment friendly through what campaign we are doing is the Can Environment Week. I think this is what we will keep on doing and work with NGO for upliftment of the life of rag pickers.
Samar, I want to get your thought. We are looking at realities of business being turned upside down in today's world. So for you as a company and looking forward within the industry, do you look at more sort of backward integration in order to keep the cost element under control? You know, how do you look at the way technology is likely to change? What are the aspects that you're looking at?
Well, I think there are broad macro indicators. There are certain societal changes that are happening that will only increase the processed food business in the country. Number one, increasing urbanization. Number two, both husbands and wives working. And I'm very fond of saying that in the old days, you know, money was the most important commodity. Today it is time that is the most important commodity. Increasingly, husbands and wives are working. Increasingly, domestic help is at a shortage. Increasingly, you have no time to cook. Having said that, a large part of India still cooks and eats fresh food every day, unlike Western economies. Right. But that's changing. If you were to look at a certain cross-section of upmarket, affluent, well-educated, young consumers across the length and breadth of metros and tier 1 and tier 2 towns in India, the packaged food or the processed food penetration is significantly higher today than it used to be. Because it lends itself to standardization, it lends itself to quality control, it lends itself to convenience, etc. And there's familiarity. So consumers, you know, can sort of pick up a particular pack, they're guaranteed of quality, etc.
Packaging is still not at par. I'd say the same product that you get here, if you were to pick it up, say, you know, off a shelf in the US, the same brand, the packaging will be completely different and the presentation will be completely different. Would you agree? I
would agree that India has a long way to go in, I think we are almost there as far as the tamper-proof or tamper-evident nature of the packaging is concerned. I think where we lag is in the convenience of usage. So if anyone has tried to struggle with ketchup sachets or, you know, butter sachets, etc., at airport lounges or at restaurants, etc., I mean, someone please explain to me how to sort of utilize them. I think the happy balance that we need to meet is ensure protection of the product, yet extremely convenient usage that even a child can use the product or the pack. I think the second part is where India is still lagging behind. Because in our enthusiasm and effort to protect, we have not yet explored the next facet, which is the ease of convenience of usage.
I think that's a point we'll all agree on. We're all nodding vigorously. Yes. But the final word has to be from an environmental perspective, because, I mean, our kids are growing up. That's the message, hopefully, that they are going to get. You know, from the environment perspective, you've heard both sides of the story. We're talking about the future. What does it look like to you?
Well, I mean, I'm guardedly optimistic that from an environmental point of view too, you know, not just from a packaging angle, but broadly speaking, you know, we will make the right decisions and we will do the right things. Clearly, education has to play a huge role in here at all levels, not just schools, but also, you know, colleges, higher education, and even what I would say K through grey, so kindergarten through the time you're grey and beyond. Right. There needs to be continuous learning throughout, and that is very, very important. In addition to that, I also believe that, you know, industry groups, the government, consumers, all of us are stakeholders as far as the environment is concerned. So we need to, you know, consumers need to maintain pressure in a way on the other entities and make their decisions that are environmentally aware. Right. Industry groups need to, you know, come together, do the kind of studies, do the kinds of analysis that is needed. Government also needs to come up with the right kinds of regulations. And we shouldn't just blindly, you know, assume that just because some item, a car doesn't have any emissions from its tailpipe because it runs on electricity, it is somehow greener. That is not at all necessary. Reality is quite much more complicated than that.
And we hope you'll keep educating us about that.
So that's right. And that is something that we all of us need to work on.
Clearly, packaging is not something, as I said at the start of the show, that we think a whole lot about, but you can see companies are thinking a whole lot about it, and it makes a huge connect with the environment. So we hope that it's been a learning for you, and you've got some important takeaways. Thanks so much for joining us, and thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on this show. With that, it's the end of this special show, Metal, the Future of the Packaging Industry.